The Circus Moreau by J.P. O'Brien. The grey afternoon was gradually giving way to twilight when Sarah, James and Mia took their regular spots on the swings behind Bracken Bay Union School. There was just one day to go until Halloween. Alex, younger than Sarah and James by 3 school years and Mia by 2, burst around the corner of the building and crunched over the leaves towards them.
"Dylan Case just told me about a hidden treasure,"
he announced before even reaching his friends. Mia tilted her head.
Did he also tell you you're really dumb?
"No,
Snapped Alex, although the sparkle in his eye dimmed slightly.
he said it was hidden at the circus."
Are you for real? I can't believe you're that gullible.
Mia pressed a finger to her chapped lips and frowned.
Actually, never mind. Yes, I can. Mia, leave him alone,
Said Sarah.
He's been here 2 seconds.
She turned to the younger boy.
There might be a treasure there. She doesn't know there's not.
Mia scrunched up her darkly freckled nose.
What's the point in letting him believe a lie?
I mean, that's not even a good lie.
James butted in, spinning on his swing from side to side so that the chains twisted above his head.
Pirates have treasure. Circuses don't have anything to do with pirates.
He dug his feet into the dirt so that he faced Alex.
Listen, that's called an urban legend. They are never true. Dylan Case just made that up to mess with you.
Alex looked back at him with large eyes that trembled beneath a floppy blonde fringe.
He didn't make it up. He said he was going to find that treasure and be rich, then go live on a tropical island.
Oh my God.
Mia sighed.
Sounds like he's got it all figured out.
Said Sarah with a kind smile.
Smart kid.
Not that smart if he thinks circuses have treasure,
Remarked James, pushing his glasses up his nose.
Hopefully his island will be safe from all the pirate ships full of clowns.
He suddenly smiled to himself, then added,
Their cannons fire confetti.
Mia snorted through her nose, but Alex didn't find it amusing. He slumped cross-legged on the ground and rested his chin in his hands.
Anyway, back in reality land,
said James, resuming his swinging.
What time are you guys coming over tomorrow? I've got some great scary movies lined up.
I'm not convinced you even know what a great movie is. Remember that terrible alien clown one? It was so ridiculous.
Laughed Sarah.
The point of scary movies is to be terrible. That's what makes them fun.
Yeah, well, you made us watch terrible movies the last 2 Halloweens, and it's not actually that fun. I didn't want you to notice, but I was trying so hard not to fall asleep last year. I noticed,
chimed in Mia. James frowned at the ground.
Well, what else is there to do?
He asked.
My brother's going to a party,
said Mia.
That's where all the high school kids go on Halloween. They drink and dress up and make out with each other.
James nodded sarcastically.
And if they want a bunch of middle school kids hanging around, I'm sure they'll bring us along too.
I can't wait until I'm old enough to drive,
Mia thought aloud.
That's the problem with Halloween,
declared Sarah.
The big kids go out and the little kids trick or treat, but there's nothing for us to do. We could throw eggs at the school,
suggested Mia, a devilish smile creeping onto her face.
They've got cameras, genius. Great way to convince everyone in Bracken Bay you're a bad kid forever,
said James.
Not to mention having to clean the mess up anyway.
Mia folded her arms in exasperation.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Halloween is boring now. We're finally old enough to see that it's not actually scary,
concluded Sarah as she kicked a stone to the side with her shoe.
It's all plastic skeletons and carved pumpkins. There's no edge. What about the year that kid went missing?
Suggested Mia.
That put all the parents on edge. Ha!
Shouted Sarah, pointing at James.
Stevie Jester, a perfect example of an urban legend that did actually happen. You see, Alex? They are true sometimes.
Alex continued drawing shapes in the dry dirt with his finger, but didn't answer.
But Stevie didn't go missing,
argued James.
Everyone knows he just ran away from home. He even took his backpack with him. He just didn't like his new stepdad, that's all.
I heard he used to show up to school with bruises,
added Mia.
Yeesh. No wonder he wanted to get out,
said Sarah. A silence fell over the group. James eventually broke it.
So, what time do you want to get started tomorrow?
James, we all know what you want to do, but no one else is into that plan.
All right, great, cool. We'll just sit around and wait until we're old enough to drive to parties instead then. Sounds awesome. I'll just shut up,
I'm just saying,
said Sarah.
there's gotta be something better. Kids all over the world spend Halloween doing creepy stuff. At the very least, they're telling each other scary stories in the woods or something. Why can't we do something like that?
Alex piped up again.
We could look for the treasure.
Hey, wait a minute.
Said Sarah as her eyes lit up.
That's perfect.
You can't be serious,
Huffed James.
No, think about it. We'll wait until the circus closes and sneak in and see for ourselves if there's really a treasure. That little turd Dylan Case isn't really going to look for it, so Alex can tell him he actually did. Even if it's nothing, at least we'll have done something instead of sitting around wishing we were the kids in those terrible movies.
Firstly, said James, staring Sarah dead in the face,
it is nothing. There isn't a treasure. Secondly, why would you even want to be those kids? They always get trapped by clowns or eaten by zombies or chopped up by hillbillies or something.
Only the stupid ones.
quipped Sarah.
Very funny. I bet circuses aren't even going to be around for much longer anyway, because you know why? Because no one wants to go to a creepy circus on the outskirts of town anymore. We all have phones now.
That's the official reason they're giving, is it?
Asked Sarah.
Shut up,
Barked James.
You said yourself it'll be creepy. That's the point. It'll be fun.
You want to break into a circus at night just to wander around aimlessly for a while and then leave? Doesn't sound that fun. That's what I'd call a massive waste of time.
Ugh, fine. We'll just watch boring, terrible movies.
She slumped backwards on her swing so that the ends of her long, dirty blonde hair touched the ground.
I need to catch up on some sleep anyway.
Awesome,
said James. He exhaled his relief through tight lips, thinking no one had noticed. But Mia had noticed.
I'm up for it.
She said, watching James out of the corner of her dark eyes. He jerked his head to scowl at her. Sarah sprang to life again.
All right, Mia gets it. Now we're grooving.
But we just decided to watch movies,
complained James.
I didn't decide that.
Cried Mia.
As usual, you two just argued and me and Alex didn't get a say. Last time I checked, there were 4 of us. That is an excellent point,
Agreed a beaming Sarah.
so we should put it to a vote. I know what I'm voting for. Me too.
Added Mia, pouting at James.
I'm not scared of a harmless widow circus.
James narrowed his eyes at her.
Well,
He said.
I'm voting to stay home with cool, terrible, scary movies and homemade popcorn. But I want to point out for the record that it's not because I'm scared to break into a circus at night. It's because chasing a made-up treasure is stupid, and you all are stupid.
Sarah gave him 2 exaggerated thumbs up.
Whatever you need to tell yourself. What about you, Alex? It's your rumor. You want to lead us to this treasure?
From his spot on the ground, Alex looked up. All 3 pairs of eyes were hanging on his decision. He smiled.
Let's find it,
He said. The following night, the 4 of them stood beside the temporary chain-link fencing that separated the rear of the circus from the rest of the playing fields. It had been set up just in front of a steep ridge of grass that led into the dense woodlands on the edge of town. Cable-tied poster boards all along the fence announced the Circus Moreau in bold letters, and illuminated by 2 upward-facing spotlights that attracted clouds of midges and gnats like a magnet, towered the big tent. The dampened sound of carnival music drifted out through the faded blue and yellow canvas, occasionally broken up by ripples of applause or impressed oohs and ahs. Sarah, with her hair trailing out of the sides of her hood, clapped her hands together excitedly.
See, this is what I was talking about. It's creepy as shit out here. Look at the moon over those moody trees. I bet there are bats in there.
Mia and Alex glanced over to where she was looking and nodded their approval. James pointed to the rank portable toilets on the other side of the fence.
What about those?
Just adds to the terror.
Shrugged Sarah.
All right, so now we're standing here. What's the actual plan?
Well, we need to wait until the show clears out and then we'll hop the fence. How long will that be?
Asked Mia. rounding her lips and pushing out a cloud of condensation.
They're supposed to finish at 9,
answered James.
I looked it up. Did you know this circus has been travelling around since the 1870s?
Old-timey circus, check.
Enthused Sarah.
A breeding ground for nightmares.
Did you read anything about the treasure?
Asked Alex, leaning forward on his toes.
No, but that's not a surprise, given keepers of treasure tend not to advertise it on their website,
scoffed James. He pulled his phone out of his jeans pocket and tried to open up the page. The browser stayed white for a moment before flashing an error.
It's not loading.
Ooh,
smiled Sarah.
We're cut off. No calling for help out here. This is shaping up to be really spooky.
She grabbed James by the shoulders and started shaking him vigorously. Alex giggled.
Get off,
cried James, ripping himself from her grip.
I know what you're trying to do, but I'm telling you I'm not scared to be here. I bet I'll last longer than you do. I even took some pocket hand warmers from my dad's camping gear.
You're such a dork.
James settled into his cozy puffer jacket and grinned smugly. Sarah rolled her eyes, then turned to Alex.
All right, Captain. So what's the deal with this treasure?
Well, Dylan Case said it's a secret stash of gold coins that belonged to the ringleader, but he died before anyone found out about it. So to protect it, his ghost still moves the treasure chest around the circus.
Alex suddenly wrinkled his brow.
But I don't really know where it would be right now.
A huge applause spilled out from the tent behind them as the music reached a crescendo. James let out an exasperated sigh.
Okay, there are several things about this that are immediately bullshit. Firstly, ghosts aren't real. Secondly, even if they were, one would not be able to push a treasure chest around because they exist on different planes. Everyone knows that. Thirdly, why the hell would a ringleader want to protect it if he's dead? Finally, and perhaps most importantly, a stash of money that somehow no one knows about is not just going to be hanging out in the middle of the big circus tent. It would be in an office or a safe or the bank or something. Or maybe, and this might sound crazy, it isn't actually real.
Alex lowered his head. The crowd could be seen starting to trickle out of the tent behind him, chatting excitedly about the show. The 4 kids dropped to the ground and watched them from the shadows.
James,
whispered Sarah directly into his ear.
I'm going to need you to be a lot less of a jerk if I'm going to stand you being here at all.
Fine,
he said, looking past her towards Alex.
Sorry.
But Alex's face was glued to the ground, trying to hide his trembling bottom lip. He found he was rapidly losing the enthusiasm to be out here at all. Sarah nudged James sharply in the ribs with her elbow. Despite his Michelin Man coat, he still let out a yelp.
Shh,
prompted Mia, checking that the crowd hadn't noticed their presence. James cleared his throat.
Well,
he said,
I do want to see how big that tent is from the inside, especially once it's empty. How about we have a look around in there first?
Aw, my guys,
said Sarah, wrapping one arm each around James and Alex.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
On the other side of the fence, the last few people were drifting towards the ground's exit. As the footsteps and conversation quietened, an uncomfortable silence descended over the group.
So, it's super old?
Sarah asked James, tilting her head slightly towards Alex.
That's what the internet said,
he shrugged.
Named after some weirdo called Langdon Moreau.
The weirdo whose ghost keeps moving the treasure?
Asked Mia. James rolled his eyes.
Sure.
Well, it's shivering my timbers, all right,
said Sarah, bumping her shoulder into Alex's. He forced out a smile for her benefit that quickly disappeared the moment she turned away. There was another awkward pause. Finally, the 2 spotlights flanking the big tent's front entrance shut off with an abrupt clunk.
All right, that's our cue,
whispered Sarah, pushing herself up with her elbows. She started to examine the fence, contemplating the best way to get over it. The 2 boys climbed to their feet as well and inspected it beside her.
Hey!
Came a yell from a little way along the fence. They turned to see Mia lifting the corner of a fence panel out of its cement block base, then pulling it back to leave a small gap.
Come on, candy asses,
she yelled. One by one, they squeezed through the gap in the fence, then, following Sarah, edged around the toilet stalls to congregate beside one of the huge spotlights. They could still feel the warmth radiating from the metal as a cloud of gnats continued to flutter around aimlessly. James waved an annoyed arm at them, and his glasses slipped down his nose.
The front of the tent is just over there,
said Sarah, peeking out from behind the spotlight.
but I think we need to go around these stalls.
She led them along a string of unlit light bulbs which joined a path of rubber matting that flattened the playing field grass beneath, as remnants of wind-swept trash blew around their feet. The crowds had all cleared out, but the smell of their fried dough treats lingered in the air, mixing strangely with the sea salt from the distant bay. On either side of the path sat a row of sideshow and food stalls, and pinned to the walls of the stalls were sepia posters of attractions: a strongman, a fortune teller, a contortionist, acrobats, clowns, a lion tamer, the loose corners of which flapped against the wooden boards. The boys stepped slowly and cautiously behind Sarah, suspiciously eyeing the empty sideshow stalls that surrounded them. Mia, on the other hand, seemed to feel right at home. She stopped to look at the poster of the strongman, depicted bending a crowbar with one hand while lifting a bench seating 2 gasping audience members in the other.
Awesome.
She whispered to herself, smiling from ear to ear.
It's like we've gone back in time,
Gushed Sarah from the front of the group.
We might as well have with no phones,
Snapped James. Sarah ignored the remark, more interested in the poster of a clown to her right. She squinted through the darkness, trying to work out if his smile was more friendly or menacing.
Creepy.
She finally decided, before turning to the others.
All right, let's work out a plan. Mia, you keep a lookout for evil clowns. James, you're on zombie watch. I guess I'll take psychopath hillbillies then. Alex, it's only fair you get ghosts of former ringleaders.
Mia and Alex smiled at the suggestion, but James raised an unimpressed eyebrow.
And if we get chased,
Sarah continued.
don't forget to split up.
James threw his hands in the air in exasperation.
You can't be serious. That's terrible advice.
He remained careful not to raise his voice above hushed tones.
Hey, Scaredy Mary,
Said Sarah, speaking deliberately loudly.
this is supposed to be fun. He's too scared for this to be fun.
Pointed out Mia.
No, I'm not.
James hissed.
I'm just reminding you all that if we get caught, we'll get in actual trouble. Trespassing is still illegal, you know.
Oh, relax.
Scoffed Sarah, waving a dismissive hand at his face.
At least we're not egging any schools.
They rounded the corner of the last sideshow stall to see the big tent rising elegantly into the sky. Waves of wind rippled down its fabric, and without the illumination from the spotlights or strings of light bulbs, it almost appeared to breathe in the cool night air. The canvas flap of the front entrance was lowered and held in place by a thick rope threaded through an eyelet in the ground.
Ooh, our first challenge.
Narrated Sarah.
No big deal. We can untie this. It's almost like they want us to break in.
Did you really think they locked the tent at night?
Quipped James.
Step aside.
Announced Mia, pushing forward and getting to work loosening the thick knot with her fingers. James tried to disguise a suspicious glance over his shoulder. Alex noticed and looked too. In no time, the rope was undone and Mia had pulled enough slack through the eyelet to open the flap.
All right.
Said Sarah. She lifted the fabric out of the way and looked over to Alex.
After you, sir.
One at a time, they ducked underneath the flap and stepped into the still warm, musty air of the big tent. A curious odour of gunpowder and sugar filled their nostrils, and even though it was dark inside, all 4 pairs of eyes were instinctively drawn upwards by the great metal pillars connected by wires and rigging above them. The central point loomed far overhead. A waist-high wall encircled the ring just in front of them, and around that, following the curvature of the tent, a dozen rows of metal bleachers peered inwards. Sarah skipped forward and let out a loud "ah" sound, stopping abruptly to listen for its echo. But the airy fabric of the tent gave her nothing by way of response. Mia hopped casually over the low wall and plodded out across the sand to the middle of the performance area, while James climbed up a few rows of benches and took a seat.
Do something,
He shouted down to Mia, who responded to him with the finger. Sarah joined Mia on centre stage and looked all around in wonder.
Wow, it's so empty.
Alex's attention, meanwhile, had been drawn to a thick blue curtain on the far side of the ring, above which was hanging a banner displaying the circus's name in huge gold letters. He edged his way along the front of the seating and pushed the curtain aside. Just behind it, separated from the ring and audience seating, he found a little backstage area. There were a number of props waiting for their next showtime: a giant hoop, a set of sturdy wooden plinths, a pair of barbells, a crowbar, a long balancing pole, a huge rubber ball, and a unicycle among them. On the sand in front of the equipment was the most curious collection of prints he had ever seen: boots, bare feet, wheel tracks, stilt tracks, and even hands. He then noticed, sitting just beside all the markings in the sand, a hefty wooden trunk. He called back to the others who were still entertaining themselves in the dark, empty ring.
Guys, I found something.
By the time Sarah and Mia had peeked their heads through the heavy curtain, Alex was kneeling in front of the trunk. He inspected the intricate carvings all along its lid and sides, which led the eye to a brass plaque and the word Moreau beautifully engraved in its centre. Alex reached out a hand and ran his fingers along the carvings on the trunk's lid, then turned to look at his friends with an amazed smile.
It's here,
he whispered. James stood looking down at them over the back of the bleachers. His mouth was wide open in disbelief.
That can't possibly be treasure,
he said finally.
It must just be a box of props or something.
His words came out more like a question than a statement.
Well, open it,
exclaimed Sarah, sidling up to Alex. Alex dutifully grabbed the corners of the trunk's lid and tried to lift it open, but it didn't budge. On its front panel beneath the name plaque was a keyhole.
It must be locked,
he said.
Try this,
said Mia, offering him the strongman's crowbar. James looked dumbfounded.
You're going to break into it? That's definitely illegal.
Alex took the crowbar, then looked back at Sarah for guidance. She glanced back up at James and shrugged.
Seems silly to find a treasure chest and not give ourselves a little sneaky peek.
She reasoned.
Plus, Halloween adventure.
James exhaled sharply and checked the empty ring over his shoulder, while Alex thrust the thin metal wedge of the crowbar into the join beneath the lid of the trunk. It seemed to groan at him.
Quietly,
whispered James from the bleachers. The younger boy tightened his grip on the handle of the crowbar and started to lean into it to pry the box open. Some splinters of the ancient wood creaked under the pressure, before quickly giving up and breaking off. In a second, the lid popped fully open and the crowbar fell into the sand with a thump.
No gold,
Alex lamented.
Just a load of stuff.
Sarah reached inside and plucked out a journal that was sitting on top of the dusty clutter. It was bound with well-worn leather and finished with ornate gold details. Etched on the front of it in cursive was the name Moreau. Alex leaned deeper into the trunk and started rummaging through several pieces of starchy fabric. They definitely felt like they were 150 years old. Beneath the articles of clothing were several books stacked in a corner and 2 smart pairs of shoes, a coin purse, some newspaper clippings and letters bundled in string, and a cigar box that rattled dully, but clearly not from coins. He opened it to be sure.
No gold,
he repeated, frowning in disappointment.
Listen to this,
said Sarah, reading from the journal.
A performer never truly leaves the circus. We remain in service eternal. It's like some kind of prayer. Gives me the willies.
Sounds like something a cult would write,
commented James from the bleachers.
Ooh, a creepy circus religion,
added Mia. Alex was double-checking under the pile of clothing and lifting up the pairs of shoes.
But no treasure,
he confirmed.
Maybe the treasure was inside us all along,
suggested Mia.
These gifts must be preserved,
continued Sarah, too engrossed in the journal to pay attention to the others.
In the name of entertainment. And then further down it says, the young and pure carries the greatest value. We must seek them out at all.
Shh, interrupted James. They all froze at once.
I saw something.
He looked towards the front entrance of the tent. For a second there was nothing, but then he noticed the circular light of a torch against the flap of the fabric. He immediately ducked down behind the top row of seating, clattering his knees against the metal. "Hey!" called a gruff voice from outside.
Run!
Hissed Sarah, throwing the journal back towards the open trunk in a panic. It knocked against the lid, which teetered for a second before slamming closed with a heart-stopping bang. "Who's back there?" came the muffled voice again. Its owner was, by now, inside the tent and stomping towards the ring. Alongside his heavy boots came an odd metallic jangling. Sarah ducked behind the wooden plinths to her left, while Mia scrambled over to pull at a closed flap in the back of the tent. She felt resistance, but found it was loose enough that she could make a small gap along its bottom edge. She heaved it open, first for Alex to duck through, and then so she could shimmy under it herself. "Aha!" came the voice as the curtain suddenly burst open. Curled in her hiding place behind the plinths, Sarah scrunched her eyes closed and tried not to breathe, but she heard the unnerving jangling sound dart past her and dive towards the flap. On the outside of the tent, Mia felt someone grab at her trailing foot. She kicked wildly at the tent fabric with her other foot until she connected with something, then yanked herself out of its grip. She looked down to see her white sock. Her shoe was still in their assailant's clutches. "You won't get far without this," Sarah heard the man yell as he grunted to his feet and hurried back through the heavy curtain, then sprinted across the ring. When the stomping and metallic jangling had retreated, she raced up from behind the plinth and peeked through the curtain herself. The ring was empty again, unnervingly so. In a panic, she ran to the front of the bleachers, then climbed up to find James still lying beneath the top bench, clutching his knee in pain. Sarah frantically prodded him in the side with a finger and mouthed,
Someone's chasing them.
At the rear of the tent, Mia and Alex scrambled to their feet and looked up to see a line of wagons parked in a circle. They darted behind the nearest one. Alex reached out to grab Mia's hand as they ran. Mia, with one shoe missing, was too focused on their getaway to notice. They hurried along the row of wagons until they were stopped in their tracks by another chain-link fence. With nowhere else to go but back towards both the tent and whoever had grabbed Mia's foot, they ducked between two crates beside the last wagon. They sat on the ground and tried to still their panicked breathing. Mia's exposed white sock was now caked in dirt.
"The ghost is after me because I broke into the treasure,"
whined Alex. Mia didn't answer. She only shook her head. The stomping of boots and the jangling of metal soon approached them on the other side of the wagon directly behind them, followed by a violent banging that the two children felt up and down their spines.
Shh!
They heard a door creak open, and then a low, muffled conversation. Alex pushed himself tightly against Mia.
"What are they saying?"
he mouthed up to her.
Shh!
She repeated, more insistently than before.
I can't hear.
A few seconds later, the conversation appeared to end. They heard the boots trailing off into the distance. But Mia remained deadly still. She could sense a silhouetted figure appear in the window directly above them.
"We'll have to keep them here,"
a voice said. Mia looked down at Alex.
It is a cult.
She mouthed. The younger boy was shivering in her arms. She tried desperately to hold him still, but he started inadvertently knocking against the crate. Mia suddenly felt eyes on her. A cold, prickly feeling burned her cheeks. A sinister, tinny voice floated out of the window above.
"Who do we have here?"
Run!
All at once, the figure disappeared from the window, and the two kids sprang up. They tried in desperation to squeeze between the wagon and the chain-link fence, but were boxed in.
Wait!
Shouted Mia. She crouched down to the concrete base between the panels. She was just starting to lift the fence out of the way when she felt a huge hand grip at her collar. Mia looked up to see a beast of a man, easily 7 feet tall, with biceps as big as her own torso, holding onto her. In his other giant hand, he clutched the whimpering Alex by the back of the jacket. He lifted the two of them off the ground as if they were as light as paper. He could have snapped their arms like twigs. 2 clowns then appeared on either side of the giant, glaring fiendishly at the children. One of them had curly red hair with the bottom half of his facial makeup removed, and beneath the white face paint was dry, scabby skin. The other, green-haired and rail-thin, grinned a devilish yellow smile and pointed a rancid finger directly at Mia.
Just who we've been waiting for,
he sneered. The giant raised them high in the air and let out a sinister, blood-curdling chuckle. Sarah and James huddled together and peeked out of the front flap of the tent, straining their ears for the merest sign of Mia or Alex or the man who was chasing them. But the night air had become ominously still.
They made a break for it.
Gasped Sarah.
They escaped out the back. Someone ran round to catch them. Was he carrying chains?
That was just keys, surely,
said James, trying to steady his breathing.
I thought tents didn't have locks.
Okay, there's no need to panic.
He grabbed at her foot.
Well,
James began, then stopped. Much to his alarm, his normally dependable sense of reason seemed to be deserting him. He fought to claw it back.
It's just a guard doing his rounds,
he eventually said.
Like at any normal circus.
I don't think this is a normal circus,
Sarah snapped.
Didn't you hear what was in that weird book? I think they kidnapped children.
James wanted to tell her that she was being ridiculous, but he found he wasn't able to. He looked into her eyes for a second, realizing that the genuine panic in them unnerved him far more than the contents of the book had done.
We need to find them and get the hell out of here.
Follow me,
said Sarah, pushing her way through the tent's flap and ducking under the heavy supporting cables around its side. James trailed her as closely as he could. When they came to the row of rusty wagons lined up at the rear of the tent, James stopped Sarah with a hand on her shoulder.
Wait,
he whispered.
What are we going to do if he's already caught them?
I don't know,
cried Sarah.
If they're smart, they'll be hiding somewhere.
Then how are we going to find them?
I don't know.
Let's just stop and think for a second,
James said. He pulled Sarah down to the ground beside one of the wagons. The dull reds and yellows of the painted wood were riddled with cracks and chips. Each one could have represented a year this ancient wagon had travelled in the circus. The full moon cast an eerie blue shadow on the dirt beside it. Leading up to the wagon's front door were 2 steel steps. On the bottom step, James noticed a child's backpack. Sarah saw him staring open-mouthed at it.
What?
She asked. James didn't answer. Instead, his forehead wrinkled from a combination of deep thought and concern.
What is it?
Sarah insisted. James clambered to his feet and, looking from side to side to make sure they were alone, pulled himself up and peeked between the metal bars of the wagon's window.
Oh my God,
he blurted out. Sarah jumped to her feet to look through the window too. In the darkness, she could see what looked like a pile of clothing. Coats, hats, gloves, all the colours, sizes and cartoonish designs of young children. James glanced at the floor and turned pale.
Look there,
he whispered.
Scratch marks.
And all these children's clothes.
Sarah whimpered.
I've never seen anything so creepy in my life.
It looks like they kept a kid locked in here.
They both stopped and looked at each other, their eyes doubling in size.
Stevie!
They cried in unison, before screaming at the top of their lungs. Just on the other side of the row of wagons, Mia and Alex were trapped in the strongman's tight grip. Mia was twisting and clawing at his hand, trying to get free, but was achieving about as much as the limply hanging Alex, already long resigned to having been caught. Suddenly, floating over the wagon roofs through the misty darkness, came the unmistakable sound of James and Sarah's terrifying screams. The strongman raised his head, alarmed. Mia saw an opportunity to twist in her jacket and land a devastating kick to his groin. He relinquished his grip for long enough that the 2 kids dropped down to the ground. As she landed, Mia dug her one remaining shoe straight into the strongman's foot. The thin plimsoll he wore did nothing to protect his toes, and he let out an agonized cry. In a flash, Mia grabbed Alex's sleeve and yanked him between the 2 startled clowns, then sped down the row of wagons towards James and Sarah's screams. Behind them, the red-haired clown let out a maniacal cackle.
All right, if that's what you want, let's give 'em a show.
Mia and Alex found their 2 friends cowering in the shadows of the painted wagon. Each looked as though they had seen a ghost.
Why are you screaming?
Shouted Mia. Sarah's face lit up at the sight of her.
You're okay,
she cried, wrapping her arms around them.
They had us.
Mia explained.
But I kicked the strong man in the balls.
We have to get out of here,
said James.
They really do steal kids.
Alex dropped to his knees.
I'm sorry,
he blubbered. The other three looked over at him.
I shouldn't have made us come here.
You didn't make us anything,
said Sarah, pulling him up and squeezing him close.
We're all safe.
Alex melted into Sarah's reassuring hug, only to hear a terrifying laugh emanate from behind the nearest wagon, mere feet away.
Go!
shouted James. The four of them sprinted in the other direction along the outside of the tent, cutting and weaving under the support cables and around the unlit spotlight. After passing the open front flap, they saw a clear path along the rubber matting between two sideshows towards where they had first entered the chain-link fence. Without thinking, they hurried towards freedom. But then, a short distance away, a lion tamer in full apparel stepped out and cracked his whip directly at them. They skidded to a halt.
Back!
yelled Mia, and they retreated the way they had come. When they got to the tent's entrance flap again, there was now an elegant woman perched daintily on a velvet stool outside. She was dressed in flowing robes and crystal ball earrings, with a crescent moon tattooed on her forehead. She made no attempt to stop them, but instead pointed menacingly into the tent. Alex couldn't help but let out a scream just at the sight of her. They started to rush past her, but by now the strong man and the two clowns were cutting off the path. Behind them, the lion tamer with his whip and an escape artist rattling chains were closing in on them. The escape artist held Mia's shoe in his hand. A pair of acrobats were approaching from the side.
There's no way out!
roared James. With nowhere else to turn, the kids ran inside the tent. 4 pairs of feet pounded into the darkness, hopped the waist-high wall, then drifted into the middle of the sandy ring.
We need to hide,
cried James, trying to look in every direction at once.
There!
shouted Mia, pointing towards the heavy blue curtain. They took a step towards it, but halted the moment they saw the Circus Moreau banner flutter. They realized there was nowhere they could go. They were being toyed with. Sarah looked back to see the front flap of the tent being pulled closed. In the silence, she could hear ropes being strapped across it.
I think they've got us,
sighed James. Alex suddenly felt the presence of something else in the tent with them. He squinted up into the darkness amongst the rafters. All at once, the spotlights outside the tent clunked on, and the lamps above their heads flooded the ring. They all shielded their faces from the blinding light with their arms. The deafening opening notes of circus music poured out of the speakers suspended from the pillars. It was now so loud they could feel their shoes vibrating against the sand. The kids froze back to back in the center of the illuminated ring. A terrifying giggle ripped out of the speakers above their heads.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it echoed.
Happy Halloween! Now sit back and enjoy the show.
Unable to stifle a panicked cry, James made a dash for the bleachers. Alex followed close behind him.
And they're off,
announced the clown voice from the speakers before unleashing a heart-stopping cackle. From the rigging wire above the ring, a leopard-skinned figure swung down on a cord directly into James's path. The boy dived headlong into the sand to avoid him. Alex, right behind, ran blindly into the acrobat's hands. He was promptly picked up and swung 20 feet above the ground.
No safety nets for naughty little boys,
blared the narration from the rafters. Another acrobat, this one all in black, swung close from another cord and grabbed Alex by the ankles from the first acrobat's hands. Swinging like a pendulum, the second acrobat started spinning in tight circles, sending Alex's cries in every direction over the relentless organ music. Down on the ground, a petrified Sarah gasped as she watched Alex's flight. The green-haired, lanky clown suddenly rose up behind her and covered her mouth with a white and red spotted handkerchief.
"Ooh, so sneaky,"
rained down the sinister, giggling voice. The girl screamed into the handkerchief, bit down as hard as she could on the clown's hand, and ran stumbling away into the sand. The green-haired clown ripped his hand away and cried out in pain. James, who by now had clambered up the first half-dozen rows of the bleachers, suddenly looked up to see the escape artist rattling chains right above his head. He tumbled backwards, and his glasses were sent flying off his face. He blindly felt around in his pockets, pulled out the hand warmers, and hurled them at his attacker. They sailed pathetically over the back row of the bleachers. The clown voice from the speakers cackled and said,
Oh, you'll have to aim better than that.
Mia suddenly saw a shadow on the sand at her feet and turned around to see the strong man towering above her. Baring his teeth, and with a menacingly deep voice, he growled, "Payback." Mia snarled back up at the strong man and threw her entire body weight at his chest. He didn't move an inch. Mia, on the other hand, took the full force of her own push and fell backwards against the floor. She landed awkwardly on her arm and heard a snap.
Oh my God, are you okay?
Said the giant in a voice at least 2 octaves higher than before. He frantically looked around and waved his arms in the air.
Stop! We've got an injury!
The music abruptly cut off from the speakers, and the clown voice cleared his throat, then announced,
Just a second, everyone.
The acrobat slowed his spinning, and, still holding onto Alex's ankles, threw a concerned glance in Mia's direction.
We had an injury before,
shouted the annoyed green-haired clown, shaking his bitten hand above his head. His voice was also markedly different. Sarah, lying on her side in the sand with her hair over her face, just froze, totally bewildered.
Huh?
You came here for a scare, didn't you?
Called the escape artist from the bleachers, rattling his chains. The strong man snapped at him from the ring.
For God's sake, Bill, he said. Just hold off on the theatrics for a moment, will you? We need to help this poor girl. What's your name, sweetie?
Mia was too busy clutching her shoulder and groaning in agony on the ground to answer.
What the hell is going on?
Asked James, crumpled in an upside-down heap on the bleachers. The fortune teller drifted into the ring from behind the curtain, holding her long gown out of the way of her feet. Her crystal ball earrings jingled as she ran. In one hand she carried an ice pack. She kneeled beside Mia and placed her elegant hands on her back to keep her still.
We're phoning for an ambulance,
she said in a soothing voice.
We're so sorry. We had no idea this would happen.
Alex's acrobat had steadied his swing and was now gradually lowering the boy down.
Are you still kidnapping us?
He asked innocently as his feet touched the ground.
Wait a moment. Were you kids genuinely scared?
Asked the escape artist with a note of concern. He lowered his chains and they clattered on the seating in front of him.
We thought you were enjoying yourselves.
Enjoying ourselves?
Exclaimed Sarah.
Of course we're scared. You chased us, you grabbed us, you...
The green-haired clown threw his hands up in a shrug, almost defensively.
You broke into a circus on Halloween night. We thought you wanted a scare. Yeah,
added the lion tamer.
We do this every year. Some gang of kids always breaks in looking for a Halloween scare. We do our thing and they run out screaming and laughing, then go and tell their friends. We assumed you were playing along. We thought you were a creepy cult,
shouted James.
You kidnap kids and keep them chained up.
The escape artist looked at the chains wrapped around his hands and turned his head innocently to the side.
Of course we don't,
argued the voice through the speakers.
We're just performers. What about Stevie Jester?
Said James, starting to sound a little unsure of himself.
Didn't you keep him locked up in a wagon just outside?
The fortune teller looked shocked.
What? Absolutely not. We would never actually hurt children, and we don't know anyone called Stevie Jester.
What about all the creepy children's clothes in that wagon outside?
Wailed Sarah.
Do you mean our lost and found? But there were scratch marks on the floor,
added James.
Well, we used to have more animals,
answered the lion tamer.
But,
he shrugged,
times have changed.
He cracked his whip sadly.
Wait a moment,
interrupted the strong man, stroking his chin with enormous sausage fingers.
Stevie Jester? Yes, I think I recognize that name now. Wasn't he that little fellow police around here were looking for?
You're right, I remember it clearly,
said the fortune teller, putting a dainty finger to the moon tattoo on her head. The green-haired clown rolled his eyes.
They came and questioned us because he went missing, but the police ended the investigation when he showed up in another state with his aunt.
But what about the creepy Moreau journal?
Bawled Sarah incredulously.
It says you need to look for children to keep forever.
Creepy Moreau journal?
The escape artist's eyes bulged with realization as he looked towards the backstage area. One of the acrobats skipped over to the heavy blue curtain and pulled it back. The performers were aghast to see the damaged trunk with splints broken off it, with the crowbar resting on the sand 2 feet away.
You broke into Moreau's belongings?
Cried the lion tamer.
That was his personal footlocker. That was a 150-year-old antique trunk you've destroyed.
That guy was a creep,
Shouted Sarah, trying not to let her voice quiver as the guilt crept over her. The lion tamer's eyes widened.
What? No! He was a man devoted to his craft. We hold his word in high esteem, of course, but we're no cult. He always maintained circus folk have a solemn duty to perform. That's what all of this is about.
He was interrupted by a siren approaching faintly from across the playing fields. The strong man held up his enormous hands and pleaded for quiet with his gentle voice.
Enough bickering, everyone. This was clearly just a misunderstanding.
He went over to help Sarah up from the sand. The escape artist, in turn, assisted James back onto his feet in the bleachers, handed him his glasses, then made sure Mia's shoe was returned to her.
We misjudged how much you could handle,
Continued the strong man sincerely.
We apologize. First things first, we'll get her to the hospital. But for now, the show's over.
A few moments later, as the paramedics were carefully lifting Mia into the back of the ambulance, the strong man took James and Sarah aside.
Look,
He said quietly.
we're very sorry it went this far, but we still have to settle that trunk you damaged. And your parents need to know you were here.
Sarah's stomach dropped.
Are you going to call the police?
The strong man sighed.
We could. But considering we scared you poor kids half to death, not to mention your little friend getting injured, maybe we could come up with something else you could do. This was our last show, and we need to pack up next week. What if you came back and lent us a hand? Work off what you owe.
James and Sarah exchanged a glance.
Deal,
Said James decisively. The following Monday afternoon, Sarah, James, and Alex crowded into the back of Mia's brother's car. Mia, with her arm in a sling, sat in the front. Each gazed sullenly out of the window, not uttering a word. Mia's brother grinned to himself as he pulled out of the school gates.
So, just so I understand correctly, you broke into a circus on Halloween and were surprised when you got scared.
Shut up, Tom.
Snapped Mia, continuing to stare grumpily out of the window. Tom chuckled to himself.
And you somehow also broke an antique, and now the clowns are making you work to pay off your debt. That's hysterical.
I said, shut up.
Mia attempted to turn and hit him with her good arm, but was stopped by a jolt of pain in the broken one. Sarah chimed in from the back seat.
I'd rather work than get arrested.
James was slumped low.
I'm so mad at myself,
He said.
We could have just stayed home watching terrible movies.
Nobody responded. Sarah shrugged.
Well, at least we got our Halloween adventure.
Another heavy silence fell on the car, broken up only by the steady clicking of the indicator as Tom made a turning. He then awkwardly cleared his throat.
Whatever. You'll all be laughing about it before too long. I still can't believe we really thought they were kidnapping kids,
Said James as a smile suddenly crept onto his face.
A lost backpack and some scratch marks, and we made up a whole story for ourselves.
We weren't thinking.
Offered Sarah.
We were scared.
That's my point. I thought I was smarter than that. Yeah, well, I was the one who believed Dylan Case in the first place.
Muttered Alex.
You all only went along with it because of me.
That's not even the stupidest thing that happened.
Grinned Mia.
I thought I could take down a giant by running into him. Okay,
Agreed Sarah, smiling to herself.
I think you win.
Congrats.
Added James. They each chuckled before settling down into their seats. Before long, Tom pulled up to the main entrance of the playing fields. The circus tent still loomed, its blue and yellow fabric flapping lightly in the breeze, but in the pleasant afternoon light was as harmless as a storybook. The 4 younger kids let themselves out of the car as Tom leaned over to address Mia through the open door.
I'll come and pick you up in a few hours. Don't do anything stupid, dingus.
Mia slammed the door closed and pulled a face at him through the window. As the 4 of them walked underneath the main sign, they were greeted by the strongman. Rather than his performance leotard and plimsolls, he was now dressed in an ill-fitting tracksuit and beaten tennis shoes. Beside him on the floor were several brooms and a bucket filled with an assortment of rags and bottles of cleaning fluid.
Hey kids,
He waved.
we've decided to assign each one of you to cleaning a different part of the grounds. And before we get started, we'll need you to swear an oath on this.
He pulled out Moreau's journal, holding it with reverence.
After all, you're part of Moreau's circus from now on.
Sarah looked at James and smirked.
Definitely not a cult.
You have been listening to the By Torchlight podcast. For more, visit patreon.com/bytorchlight or search By Torchlight on Spotify and YouTube.